I wanted to watch this interview that a Chinese soldier fighting in Ukraine gave. Now, this is a former People's Liberation Army soldier, so this is somebody who served with the Chinese army and then decided to sign up as a mercenary working for the Russian government. Now, the Russian government has been trying to fill its manpower pools without engaging in another wave of mobilization. And we just got a report from Reuters that indicated that Vladimir Putin is, according to anonymous Russian sources, is not super excited about another wave of mobilization, because another wave of mobilization would probably not be received too swimmingly by a largely either war apathetic or kind of quietly supportive population. The first wave of mobilization led to a few drops, a real drop in Putin's approval ratings in the pollsters doing polling in Russia. Now, mind you, there is real problems with polling in Russia, but if there is a noticeable drop in support for Putin right after mobilization is implemented, that is of a concern to him. And that is still of a concern to him. So if he can find other ways to get people in Russian army uniforms invading Ukraine while not engaging in another wave of mobilization, which could turn the public against him or could lead to more people not supporting him or just like a wavering in support for the war, he has decided to find other ways. Now, some of the solutions that he's introducing is kind of like basically mobilization, but it's not mobilization. So what they'll do is, for example, they'll like change a year here, change a year there, or they'll lower the medical requirements there so that before, a few weeks before, you couldn't be mobilized, but now you can be mobilized. And so they call that shadow mobilization. So there is a form of mobilization going on, but if it's not publicized and they're not making big sweeping changes that gets millions upon millions of more people into the hat and making a public announcement of it and mobilizing the resources to do that, it's going to be hard for them to constitute a bunch of new Russian military units, and it's going to be hard to for them to continue to push this war in another 2-3 years down the line, since currently there is no end in sight. And so one of the solutions has been to offer increased pay. Now, this increased pay has attracted Russians who don't have great economic prospects, and those economic prospects has only gotten worse because of the war, which has a effect of sending more men who have negative economic prospects into the arms of the armed forces. But it is not just Russians who want good money. And if you're offering $3,000 a month to serve in the Russian armed forces, which is a lot more than what the conscripts were getting before, that could also be attractive to people in countries where $3,000 a month is a pretty penny. Now, I think to you guys and to me, the idea of going out there and dying for the Russians for $3,000 a month is ridiculous. I'd much rather do it for a lofty idea of history myself and documenting it. But $3,000 might not be enough if you live in LA, but if you live in like Tanutuva, or if you live in the middle of Siberia as a reindeer herder, that is a significant pretty penny. But it's also a significant pretty penny if you're from Eritrea, or if you're from Sudan, or if you're from other places, including some parts of China. And so these bigger and bigger contracts have started to bring over foreign mercenaries, some of which, in interview after interview, have claimed that they have been purposely misled. There was a bunch of interview with Sri Lankan soldiers who felt that they had been misled to be brought over to Russia. And then the Sri Lankan government even went as far to say, stop taking our men, bring them back, stop stealing our people. This has also happened with the Nepalese government. This has also happened with the Serbian government. This happened with a bunch of governments as Russia gobbles up a bunch of these foreign fighters as mercenaries. Now compare that to the Ukrainian side, where most of the foreign volunteers are making like $150 to maybe $200 a month fighting for the like International Legion, not as mercenaries, but as volunteers. And I would make that distinction, because if you're not fighting for money, you can't really be a mercenary. I mean, what's a soldier of fortune but somebody who fights for profit and survival, not somebody who fights for ideology or purpose in the same way that, a volunteer would. But point is, though, the Russians want more foreign recruits, because if a foreigner dies, then that doesn't affect Putin's popularity, and that doesn't affect their demographics at the end of the war. So better them than us, it seems to be the Russian perspective on this. And so that has attracted a lot of people, including this former Chinese soldier who went over there and served, But then, after he went to Ukraine, just like has happened to previous Chinese soldiers, just like Sri Lankan soldiers, Cuban soldiers, and others, they found that they had been slightly sold a false bill of goods of how easy the work was going to be, and that their lives were very much in constant danger, and they were not very much welcomed by the country that they were invading. Let's play this translation. This translation is done by Lay's Real Talk. I don't really watch any of their other content, but they translated it, so I wanted to give them a mention as the source. Li Jianwei, we're just going to call him Li. He had served in the PLA for over 2 years and is from Henan province. He flew to Russia last December and has been telling his combat experiences on Chinese social media. I'm mostly recovered. I haven't had a bowel movement in about 2 weeks. After returning, I ate a lot of butter and other things to help my digestive system. But I still suffered a hemorrhage. I used the toilet only once in the past 2 weeks since we left. I have diarrhea now, and I'm not feeling well. Well, this started happy. The first echelon had 12 people and 2 combat teams. You can say 4 combat teams. It's our first time fighting in urban warfare as a veteran support force. New recruits. I tell you, the fatality rate was like, from the time you entered the battlefield until you died, it took an average of 8 to 10 hours. It's that fast. 8 to 10 hours is bad. I mean, I remember like hearing those type of numbers for like Bakhmut, and it was horrific. I wonder what part of the front he served on. I doubt he's going to say. It's that fast. We fought for at least a month. Because many rooms had corpses. And in the videos that I released, the rooms all had dead bodies. The smell was terrible. Almost every basement had people dying from both sides. Only Little Black, a black man, a Russian, and I came back. And a guy from Nepal. They call the black man they serve with Little Black? Okay. Who was hit by 4 pieces of shrapnel. Little Black was hit by shrapnel. The Russian was also hit in the leg. I was hit by the bomb and thrown to the top of the house. Half of my body was nailed. I wore a bulletproof vest, so I was okay. A shrapnel scraped my left arm. I saw it later when taking a shower. Street combat is very brutal, not what I had imagined. The second fighting team went in and suffered a high fatality rate. Many died. Many died. In the old camp, there were 2 Indians. They went there as support forces with the other troops and haven't returned. They sent me messages and are still alive. If Luca receives good medical care, he can save his leg. If not, he has to undergo leg amputation. I haven't talked to Little Black since I've relocated here. It's because one night, he and I and 2 Russians formed a 4-person combat team and conducted a reconnaissance of a building. If we ran into the enemy, we would fight. On our way, we ran into drones. They were reconnaissance drones with bombs. It's called Bika. Bichka. Whether you call it attack drones, bombing drones, or whatever, it's called kamikaze in Russian. It has 2 modes of attack. We were attacked by drones and bombs. I was hit by a bomb, my backpack was gone. The munitions used here are weak. There are mortars, but the power is low. There's a Polish mortar that gives a different sound. The mortars from the other countries would first give an explosive sound. Then came the second sound. After it lands on the ground and explodes, you hear the third sound. But the Polish mortars have no sound when launched. They give no sound when flying through the air. Because this is a plain, the wind is very strong. If you listen carefully, you can hear a s sound. They are very dangerous. During combat that evening, Little Black was afraid. He had never been in the military before. When he was in the armored unit, he was just along for the ride. He didn't sign up to fight in the battle in the woods. I understand why he was scared of urban combat. He ran away. The two Russians also ran away. I don't blame him. Nothing to blame. That's why on the battlefield you cannot trust anyone, including your teammates. I mean outside of China. In China, we don't have this problem. Our Chinese servicemen are like brothers in life and death. If a war breaks out, they'll definitely save you. They are even willing to sacrifice their lives to save you. But outside of China, you can only depend on yourself. None of them are dependable. I'm telling you this, man. Okay, let's pause it here because I was lucky enough to come back alive. Let's pause it here. So, what have we gotten so far from this interview? Incredibly high casualty rates from the men he was serving with, indicating that, as has previously been reported, that a lot of these foreign fighters are being thrown in some of the hottest parts of the front, because, I mean, a lot of commanders treat them as more expendable. Of course, this is what I'm implicitly assuming. I do want to put that out there. But also what we're taking from this interview is that the people he's working with are terrified of urban combat, and he, from his experience, can depend on Chinese soldiers more than Russian soldiers, more than the culmination of different forces, of different mercenaries and Russian soldiers that make up the Russian armed forces. And he thinks that, and mind you, now, I don't want to, I feel like I could kind of go through this very quickly, but I want to emphasize that the Russians' armed forces motto is no one left behind. That's their motto. But I've seen countless videos from this war of Russian soldiers doing just that, and leaving their men behind. And here we have a Chinese soldier testifying that here you cannot depend on the Russian army. You cannot depend on your brother in arms. In this type of mercenary work, you can only depend on yourself. And he's lucky enough to be alive considering the high casualty rates that he's experiencing. Anyway, continuing. I found an abandoned place not discovered by the enemy, and later got reunited with the guys. Little Black wanted to apologize to me. It's okay, I came here while he was sent somewhere else. I asked if we should bid farewell to him. He said it's not necessary. What's that for? A Cuban is faking sickness. He said he has a heart condition and didn't go to the battle in the woods. He didn't fight in the street combat. He was in an armored unit and wasn't on the front line. He was not even in the second line, but was in the third line doing nothing much. I don't know what else to tell you. Oh yes, before we left, Little Black cooked a meal. Beef stew. When we arrived there, we received a resupply and ate a meal. I ate canned food 3 times. After that, we didn't eat anything. I remember once I ate 2 cans of food. One was beef and one was chicken. When I found butter, I ate at least 4 pieces. I didn't expect to be on the battlefield for so long. In the past, the longest was 24 hours. We used to rest during the day and fight at night. Here we fight day and night, non-stop. The opponent has a fucked amount of drones. I know you haven't seen how their drone bombs. I know you haven't seen how they drone bomb tanks. We have signal interference here. We can hear them coming from a distance. The drones come overwhelmingly in the sky, more than birds. They flew over in drones with 1 or 2 drones leading the pack. If you have signal interference, you can only interfere with the first 2 drones. The ones in the back drop bombs on you and your surroundings. You can't even lift your head. No one dares to. The opponent does a great job with intelligence gathering. When one of our tanks got on the battlefield, they'd know. A few drones would come with C4 explosives or anti-tank rockets. I think he's talking about RPG-7 rounds that are strapped to drones and then flown into tanks. A lot of times, though, RPG-7 rounds don't have enough explosive to necessarily take some of the more armored vehicles, so they've been packing more explosive. And for some of the anti-personnel effects, they've been wrapping them in like nails and wires and barbed wire and stuff like that to be fired near the front. But for the anti-tank stuff, it's usually RPG-7s packed with even more explosive on top of it. A few drones would come with C4 or anti-tank rockets and launch at least 2 or 3 rockets on the tank, and thus it became a pile. You have no time and nowhere to run. This street combat is completely different from what I had imagined. I had thought I could throw a grenade and kick open the door, like what I saw in the movies. It's like reliving the movie experience, right? No, it's not the same thing here. Fuck. The opponent is ruthless. We are ruthless too. I'm gonna be brutally honest. No one will show mercy. The most ordinary bullets are replaced with armored-piercing bullets. They want the bullets to be deadly, deadly, deadly. Do you get it? After the veterans are finished, they pull some veterans from other troops to support us. We can't communicate due to language barriers and can't collaborate. To die in combat is instantaneous. One can be smoking for a few minutes before getting an order to attack another base. I always do wonder, because they don't have enough of people of necessarily one nationality to make up like a whole mechanized brigade. They don't have that. So a lot of times you'll see like Chinese soldiers with Cuban soldiers, with Sri Lankan soldiers, with like some other like mercenaries that they've gathered together, and whatever like Russians that have been given the task of being assigned with them. And the communication stuff is bad. I've seen examples of Russian soldiers going to positions that are completely made of Indians, in the instances where they actually keep people together who all know the same language, and they literally would know no Russian. So they'd stand there and they'd look around and be like, can we talk to anyone in this position? And they couldn't, because nobody would speak Russian. One can be smoking for a few minutes before getting an order to attack another base. One can die instantaneously. The opponent has many drones. If you see the reconnaissance drones, they bring bombs. If you see suicidal drones, they are here to bomb you. Yeah, but you don't always know what's a reconnaissance and what's a suicide drone. You don't always know. I'm rather lucky and never met suicide drones. I saw one inside a building when the walls got bombed. The walls here are very thick. I showed you the walls when I filmed in the hospital. I tell you, a 2-story building was bombed to be 1 story. We were afraid to leave our post. The 1 story was bombed to only have a story left. We hid under the cement slabs. There's a lot of buildings like that. With just one building. It was 3 stories, now it's 1 story. A lot of them. We hid under the cement slabs. Their drones flew over our heads and bombed us like crazy. Fuck. They were the large drones with mortars. During the day, there were smaller suicidal drones that targeted the windows. So what they try to do, and I don't know if you've seen these videos, but what they do is they will pack these drones with a shit ton of explosives. Sometimes they'll wrap it with like different like bits of shrapnel, like nails, screws, barbed wire, and then they'll fly the drone into the window of the building where the Russians are staying. So they'll like try to have the drone operator try to fly the FPV right into the window so it gets right in there as the Russians are stationed inside, explodes, and kills them. And if the shrapnel doesn't kill them, then the internal bleeding from the shockwave will kill them. At least that's the idea. You have nowhere to hide. Buildings here are far apart from each other. After we evacuated in the end and regrouped with veterans from other troops, we attacked 2 strongholds with windbreaks next to them. I tell you, we lost dozens of people and didn't take them. I've been here for about 2 weeks. Wait, what? This is a story. I'm sorry. I'm taking it. This is all from 2 weeks? That's a lot. That's a lot in 2 weeks, man. Damn. What an experience. Based on everything I saw and knew, we launched offensives 3 times, but didn't succeed. We advanced only 100 meters. The opponent has barbed wire and dug trenches. It's kind of interesting that he's just calling them the opponent instead of the Ukrainians. I mean, he's a mercenary. I guess he doesn't really view it that way. There are also anti-tank mines and other mines. At that moment, you don't think about the mines. The opponent's machine guns, heavy machine guns, the rifle grenades, drones, all come after you. And this is true. When you're in one of those, and there's so many videos of Russian like tank drivers where they get hit or someone next to them get hit, so they panic, so they start trying to drive away, so they go off of the cleared path because there will be like mine clearers that will go in front of an armored assault, and so they'll try to go around, panicking, go out of the cleared path, and then hit a mine, and sometimes make the situation even worse. The opponent's machine guns all come after you. There were also mortars and rockets bombing you. You have nowhere to hide. The thickest trees on the road were thinner than my wrist. It's really hard to take the bases. I suspect the place is a trap set up by the other side. Man, when the losses are so bad, you think it's bait. My God. In addition, after we occupied this building, the opponent uses walkie-talkies. But they changed the channel immediately. We are the same. We change the channels every hour. If you forget your channels, you are finished because you have lost contact with your command. Another situation is when Russian teammates die. I can't communicate, though I know how to use the walkie-talkie. You have no way to communicate. All cell phone signals are blocked. After you occupy the building, the first priority is defense. If you don't, the opponent's mortars will have already marked you as a target. As soon as you slack off, their drones would come, followed by mortars and rifle grenades. When you try to hold the place and are in need of support, the opponent will drop cluster munitions on you. They explode in the air with a waft of smoke. So how cluster munitions work, and that's what he's describing right now, is that as the cluster munition comes in, it has a container that's holding whatever the cluster munition is. If we're talking about like a 155 millimeter shell, for example, it'll hold like 72 to 88 cluster bombs, also known as bomblets. And then depending on where it opens up over the target, it can spread out those bomblets to cover an area that can be as big as a football to 2 football fields. And so that's what he's describing there, how it opens up before dropping the bomblets on top of you. In 2 seconds, they explode everywhere in a large area. They are not fatal to armor, but are deadly to humans.
但是对人员杀伤是非常大的。
At that moment, you don't even care about
什么
mines.
防步兵地雷，根本就不会想那些说。你挨上
If you step on one, so be it, because your enemies don't give you time to think.
根本就没时间思考这个问题，你知道吧？那路上
There are many corpses on the road. Some are covered with white cloth, while some are covered with
都
clothing.
是我们自己人。
They are our soldiers.
还有大家在
People ask why we all wear a white armband.
那个缠那个白色胶带啊，
Because the Russian national flag has white, blue, and red.
红。我们是
So we wear white armbands. Okay, but the Ukrainians wear blue armbands and yellow armbands. So are they both? And there was a point where they were both kind of wearing like similar armbands. Whatever. This is very minor. The color isn't an auspicious one and is like attending funerals in China. I was a bit repulsed. I asked why we didn't wear red. The answer was that some of the troops wore red, some of the other troops wore red, and we were white per se, the order of our superior. Per the order of our superior. What was the order? Kill everyone who's not wearing a white armband within our eyes' reach. Finish them all. That's how ruthless it is. The Russian propaganda is one thing, but they are brutal in action. Bro, I've been caught in combat for 4 days and nights. Street combat is no fun. Not fun at all. It costs too many lives. When we started, we had 12 men. A few got injured and the rest died. Damn. A few Russians joined us later. They died too, because of their lack of experience. Little Black follows me everywhere. Oh, there he is. What is this music? Why this song?
Yes or no?
They sent us a few more Russians. They are all finished. The neck cut. Oh my gosh. How better to send a message than the neck cut to indicate death? My goodness. You know, it'd be a brutal thing chat could do right now. Hit that like button. On YouTube, that is. The YouTube chatters. Including the man from Nepal. Little Black is terribly scared. We have one Russian left. What are we doing here? Waiting to be sent. The Russians are stubborn and want us to continue fighting. Is that it? Okay, here we go. Last statements. What does he have to wrap this video up with? What's the last thing we're gonna hear from this guy? Over a dozen people died over the past few days. Bro, this war is unwinnable. It's too tough to win. The human cost is too high. Damn. That's all. I'm smoking. And I'll send this video. I'm confident I'll send this video upon my return. My appearance is sad. I look like a barbarian. Man. What an interview. That, I gotta say, honestly, that was probably one of the best interviews I've seen. And it wasn't even an interview. It was just him testifying. from one of the mercenaries, giving an insight about, the problem with communication, with a lot of these people not speaking the same language, a lot of people coming over here thinking like himself that it's going to be like in the video games and like what he sees in the movies, how the cost in life for both the foreign fighters and the Russians themselves is tremendously high, that he's had close call experiences himself, and these things happen within a short period of time. Most of the stories he was telling within a 2-week time period. In this last story he was telling about the 12 who have died, and the majority of those soldiers and their replenishments dying was within 4 days as they fought through day and night. As he's talking about not fighting during the day and then resting, but fighting through the day, fighting through the night, fighting through the day, fighting through the night. And so these are people who are not enshrined in Russian military culture when we're talking about this individual or his friend, his African friend. This is somebody who is outside from a Chinese military perspective looking in. And so he can come from a different perspective that those with prior experience in the Russian armed forces cannot. And his interests in the war are different than the interests of everybody else. His interest is profit. He's a mercenary. And so he can come out and say, yeah, the Russians are brutal. They'll kill them. They have extremely high losses. They're stubborn. And he'll say things that if he said in the Russian armed forces could get him easily court-martialed. Stuff that he doesn't have any attachment to, because I don't know how he really feels about the war itself, but he openly said that the war is unwinnable. At least unwinnable when it comes to what the Russians want, and that's, subserving Ukraine and achieving all of Putin's end goals of taking all the Russian-speaking land and taking Yanukovych and putting them in there. I think that this interview is useful, and it also shows that out of all of the benefits for people who are covering war and investigating war and researching war, one of the main things that make wars like this in wars in the last 10, 12 years much easier to document is just the ability of these soldiers to have little reporting devices, little cameras in their pockets, on their phones, recording their experiences and posting their testimony online. Not only is that a huge asset risk with soldiers accidentally posting their positions, with soldiers accidentally leaking information that shouldn't be leaked, but it also allows historians and people who want to document the experiences and perspectives of these people and see the type of conditions they fought under, it helps them to document it better. So I'm happy that this guy's recording an experience. I hope he goes home sooner rather than later, because he's already had enough close to death experiences for a lifetime. All of you debate heads out there, we're still in the foreign policy zone and you can't stop me. You cannot stop me from talking about the complicated geopolitical events of the world. No matter how much drama and easy views you offer me, I will not stop. I will not cease until we understand the conflicts better that we discuss on a daily basis. Okay,